Hello, good evening. It's an exciting night of algebra as usual. Tonight I'm going to give this a little 80s flair, because we're talking about rational exponents, and another way for a rational exponent, it's also called radicals. Radicals. So it's totally rad. Got it? Get my 80s connotation there. Okay. So far we have talked about the exponent rules when we're talking about exponents that are whole numbers. So you have a x to the 2 or an x to the 5, the fifth power. But all the powers that we've been working with are whole numbers. So I'm going to be teaching you today how you can solve exponents that are fractions, which are your favorites, but it's not hard. So what we're going to do, we're just going to start with this easy square root problem. You know that the opposite of a square root is an exponent, right? So, for example, I'm going to write it up here. 5 squared, right? The opposite of 5 squared, and let me zoom in so you guys can see these notes better today. The opposite of 5 squared, another way to write that is, of course, the opposite of that is square root of 25, right? So 5 squared and square root of 25, those are opposites, okay? They don't equal each other. Sorry. They don't equal each other. But you can see how they're related. Alright? Because 5 squared is 25. And then the square root of 25 is 5. Alright? So that's kind of how they're related. Alright, so square root of 25 is the same thing as 5 times 5. Would you agree with that? 5 times 5 is the same thing as the square root of 25. So the square root of 25 is 5, right? This can also be written as 25 to the 1/2. 25 to the 1/2. Okay? So this, if you ever see a half exponent, it's the same as a square root. You just put a square root and then that number goes inside. The base goes inside the square root. Okay? Like this. Alright? So let's do some practice here. Let's go backwards. A to the 1/2. A to the 1/2. If we said 25 to the 1/2 is the square root of 25. It's the same thing. What is A to the 1/2? Well, that's going to be the square root of A. Alright? And because it's a 1/2, you have this 2 here as the denominator of the fraction. That is just a regular square root, okay? Because it's 2, it's squared. A squared, square root, okay? So a cube root, when we see cube, you should think, maybe you think of an actual cube, a box, okay? And the reason it's called a cube is because it has 3 dimensions, length times width times height, right? It's 3 dimensions. So you should think of 3. 3, when you see the word cube in math, you should think 3. Square, you should think 2. Okay? Cube, you should think 3. Alright? So a cube root is written as x to the 1/3 and can also be written as, we're going to put our x, that's our base, so we're going to put it inside of the square root. But this isn't a square root, it is a cube root. And the way we make it a cube root is we put a 3 right here by the little check mark. Okay? So this is called a cube root. It is another way of writing x to the 1/3. Alright? So 8 to the 1/3, we're going to put our square root check. We're going to put our base inside of, we're going to move that 8, okay? It's going to go inside of the square root check, but since it's to the 1/3, we're going to write a 3 here. And the reason why up here we didn't have to write a 2 is it's kind of like x to the 1. You don't have to write the 1. It's understood that it's to 1 power. When you have a square root with no other number out here, there's no 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or whatever, it is just understood that it's a 2 because it's a square root by itself. There's no number, it's just a square root. So that's why we didn't have to put a 2 there. You can if you want, but it's not necessary. Okay? So, we could solve this. Turn on the pen caps. Cube root would mean what times what times what equals this number, okay? Because it's three times. So we know that 2 times 2 times 2, 3 2's, right? And so the cube root of 8 is 2. Because up here, our little number square root was 2. So something times something equals 25. We know it's 5. So what is it that we multiply 3 times to get 8? What's 2? 2 times 2 times 2. And you can check it because the opposite is 2 to the 3rd. Well, that equals 8. Okay? So let's look here at 27 to the 1/3. So we're going to draw our little square root sign. We're going to put our base inside. And we're going to put our little 3 here because it's to the 1/3. So ask yourself, what times what equals 27? Well, it's 3. 3 times 3 times 3 equals 27. So 3 is the answer. Whatever goes inside of here is the answer. And we could check that over here if we go the opposite. 3 to the 3rd power, does that equal 27? Yes, it should. It should equal our original base. Okay? Keep going here. We have a negative number. That's okay. So negative 8 to the 1/3. So I'm going to do my little square root with my 3 because it's a 1/3. And I'm going to put my negative 8 inside. That's my base. So I have to ask myself, what times what equals negative 8? Well, negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 equals 8. So the answer is negative 2. Whatever you're having to multiply 3 times to get that negative 8 is going to be your answer. So these are all your answers. The cube root of 27 is 3. The cube root of 8 is 2. The cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. And we could check it. We could say negative 2 to the 3rd power, well, that equals negative 8. It checks out. Okay, because negative 2 times negative 2 times the negative 2 is negative 8. Alright, so the same rules apply. What about x to the 1/4? Alright, well, you're going to make your little check mark. And then you're going to put your base inside of it. And we now are working with 1/4. So the number that's going to go on the outside here is a 4. This is a 4. Okay? Let's look at an example. 16 to the 1/4. We're on a 4th root. And we're going to put 16 here. And we have to ask ourselves, what times itself 4 times equals 16? Well, that's a 2. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So 2 is our answer. And we could check it by 2 to the 4th, doing the opposite, the inverse, I guess I should say, is 16. Okay? Negative 125 to the 1/3. There's going to be a cube root because it's 1/3. Negative 125. We have to ask ourselves, what times what equals a negative 125? Well, that's going to be a 5, a negative 5. Negative 5 times a negative 5 times a negative 5 equals negative 125. So our answer is -5. And that was on a cube root. We got that. And we could check that with a -5 cubed is 125, -125. Okay. Last practice one here is 64 to the 1/2. Well, this is just a square root, so we could put the 2 there, but you don't have to, because if without the 2 there, it's understood that it's a 2, because you can't have anything to the 1 square root, because that's square means 2. You're multiplying 2 things together. So we're going to put our base inside 64. What times what equals 64? Well, 8 times 8 equals 64, so your answer is 8. Duh. We could look at this. The square root of 64 is 8. And we could check it. The inverse. 8 squared, does that equal 64? Sure does. Check. Okay? Alright, so look on your next page. Page 2. I want you to try to do number 1 by yourself. You don't have to solve it. You're just rewriting it. So here, I'll do number 1 for you. You can do number 2 and 3 by yourself. When it just wants you to write it in a radical form, it just wants you to put it in the square root or the cube root here or the 4th root here. You don't have to solve it, okay? Because you won't be able to do this with a whole number. So this is, you write your square root. It's a cube root, so we're going to put a 3 there, and 15 goes in the box. So your answer is cube root of 15. That's where we're just going to leave it. Because what times what equals 15? Well, it's going to be a decimal, so we're just going to leave it at that. Okay? See if you can do number 2 and 3. So pause it right now, and then check your answers with mine. Pause it, and then do it. We're just rewriting it. We're not solving it. Okay, so I hope that you did really well on that one. Okay, so now we're going to go to exponential form. What it wants you to do is write it as an exponent. You don't have to solve it, just want you to write it as an exponent. So square root of 10 is the same as 10 to the 1/2. We're going backwards now. So what's the the 5th root of 34? I want you to do this one, number 5 and 6 on your own. Pause it, and then check with me. Okay, how'd you do? Did you do okay there? We had the 5th root, so it's 1 to the 1/5. The 4th root goes 1 to the 1/3. Okay. All right, on this last section here, this is where you need to do what we did on the front, where we actually get an answer. And these are nice square roots here, so you won't get a decimal. All right. So I want you to do number 7. Number 7. I want you to do number 9. I want you to do number 12. You might have to look at the front. Ooh, that's a tough one. We're going to do number 12 in class. Okay. So I want you to do number 7, 9, 8, and 9. Okay, these are the ones you want to do for homework before class tomorrow. Okay, so just to review, I want you to put it, we're going to do like we did on the front. So square root of 80 of, you just have to solve for it. Okay, so what times what times what times what equals 81. You're doing, it's a number you'll do 4 times, because to the 4th. So 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, right? I'm going to do that one for you. So it's 3. That's your answer. And you could say, you could check it by saying, what's 3 to the 4th? Well, that's 81. Check. Okay, so do number 8 and 9, and then we'll work out the 12, 13, and 14 in class tomorrow. Have a good night.